License and registration now. Officer Kevin Mitchell's voice cut through the evening air as he approached the luxury sedan he had just pulled over. Federal Judge Denise Johnson sat calmly in the driver's seat, her 6-year-old daughter in the back seat, wondering what she had done wrong. But what the police officer didn't know was that he had just stopped one of the most powerful judicial officers in the country. It was a quiet Sunday evening in Atlanta's Buckhead neighborhood, one of the city's most affluent areas. The tree-lined streets were dotted with elegant homes and upscale shopping centers, and the traffic was light as families finished their weekend activities. Judge Denise Johnson was driving home from her daughter's ballet recital, taking the familiar route through the prestigious neighborhood where she had lived for the past 5 years. At 38 years old, Denise was one of the youngest federal judges in the United States and the first black woman to serve on the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Georgia. Her appointment 2 years earlier had been the culmination of a brilliant legal career that had begun with her graduation from Yale Law School 15 years earlier. Denise had grown up in a middle-class family in South Atlanta, where her parents had instilled in her the importance of education and hard work. Her father was a high school math teacher, and her mother worked as a nurse at Grady Hospital. They had sacrificed to provide Denise with opportunities they had never had, and they had always believed that their daughter could achieve anything she set her mind to. After law school, Denise had clerked for a federal appeals court judge before joining a prestigious Atlanta law firm as an associate. She had specialized in constitutional law and civil rights litigation, quickly earning a reputation as one of the most skilled attorneys in the region. Her legal arguments were precise and persuasive, and her courtroom presence commanded respect from judges, juries, and opposing counsel alike. Denise's appointment to the federal bench had been the result of her exceptional qualifications and her commitment to justice. She had been recommended by legal organizations across the political spectrum, and her confirmation hearings had been notable for the broad support she received from colleagues and community leaders. As a federal judge, Denise presided over some of the most important cases in Georgia, including major civil rights disputes, federal criminal prosecutions, and complex commercial litigation. Her decisions were known for their thoroughness and fairness, and she had quickly earned the respect of the legal community for her judicial temperament and legal scholarship. But despite her professional achievements and public recognition, Denise still encountered situations where her race seemed to overshadow her qualification. She had learned to navigate these encounters with dignity and professionalism, understanding that her responses would often be scrutinized more closely than those of her white colleagues. On this particular Sunday evening, Denise was driving her black Mercedes SUV home from her daughter Maya's ballet recital at the prestigious Atlanta Ballet Academy. Maya had performed beautifully, and Denise was proud of her daughter's dedication and talent. They were discussing the performance as they drove through Buckhead, with Maya excitedly describing her favorite parts of the recital. Officer Kevin Mitchell, a 5-year veteran of the Atlanta Police Department, was patrolling the Buckhead area when he noticed the Mercedes SUV traveling through the neighborhood. Something about the vehicle caught his attention, though he would later struggle to articulate exactly what had seemed suspicious about it. In Mitchell's mind, the expensive car didn't fit with his expectations about who belonged in this neighborhood. While Buckhead was diverse, his unconscious biases led him to associate luxury vehicles in the area with white residents. Seeing a black woman driving alone with a child in such an expensive car triggered suspicions that he couldn't quite explain even to himself. Mitchell decided to follow the vehicle for several blocks, looking for any reason to initiate a traffic stop. The SUV was traveling at the speed limit, staying in its lane, and showing no signs of erratic driving. But Mitchell was convinced that something wasn't right, and he was determined to investigate further. When Denise made a routine right turn at an intersection, Mitchell claimed later that she had failed to signal properly, though video evidence would later show that her turn signal had been activated for the appropriate amount of time. Using this as justification, Mitchell activated his emergency lights and initiated a traffic stop. Denise was surprised to see the police lights behind her. She reviewed her recent driving in her mind and couldn't think of any violation she might have committed. She pulled safely to the curb in a well-lit area and turned off her engine, following the protocols she had learned for interacting with police officers. "Mommy, why did the police stop us?" Maya asked from the back seat, her voice showing concern. I'm not sure, sweetheart, Denise replied calmly, but we'll find out. Remember what we talked about? We stay calm and polite, and everything will be fine. Officer Mitchell approached the driver's side window with an aggressive demeanor that was immediately apparent to Denise. His body language and tone suggested that he had already decided she was guilty of something, even though he hadn't yet determined what that might be. License and registration now, Mitchell demanded, his voice unnecessarily loud and confrontational. Denise was taken aback by Mitchell's aggressive approach, but she maintained her composure. Good evening, officer, she said politely. May I ask why you pulled me over? Mitchell was annoyed by what he perceived as Denise's failure to immediately comply with his demand for identification. Ma'am, I need to see your license and registration right now. You can ask questions later. Denise recognized that the situation was escalating unnecessarily, but she also understood that arguing with the officer would likely make things worse. Of course, officer. I'm going to reach into my purse to get my license, and the registration is in the glove compartment. As Denise reached for her purse, Mitchell immediately became more aggressive. Keep your hands where I can see them, he shouted, placing his hand on his service weapon. Denise froze, understanding that the situation had suddenly become potentially dangerous. Maya began to cry in the back seat, frightened by the officer's shouting and aggressive behavior. Officer, I'm a federal judge, Denise said calmly, hoping that identifying herself might de-escalate the situation. My identification is in my purse, and I need to reach for it to show you my license. Mitchell stared at Denise, processing what she had just told him. The idea that this woman could be a federal judge seemed impossible to him. In his mind, federal judges were older white men in expensive suits, not young black women driving through Buckhead on Sunday evening. Ma'am, if you're claiming to be a judge, you need to prove it, Mitchell said, though his tone had become slightly less aggressive. Denise carefully reached into her purse and retrieved her wallet, which contained both her driver's license and her official federal court identification card. She handed both items to Mitchell, who examined them closely under his flashlight. The federal court ID was unmistakable, with official seals and security features that clearly identified Denise as a United States District Judge for the Northern District of Georgia. Mitchell found himself holding proof that he had just treated one of the most powerful judicial officers in the state with unnecessary aggression and disrespect. Judge Johnson, Mitchell said, his demeanor changing completely as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. I was just doing my job. Denise took her identification back and put it away. Officer Mitchell, she said, reading his name tag, I understand that you have a job to do, but I'm curious about why you decided to stop me. What traffic violation did you observe? Mitchell felt trapped by the question because he knew that his justification for the stop was weak at best. You failed to signal properly when you made that turn back there, he said, though he wasn't confident in his assertion. Denise knew that she had signaled properly, and she also understood that the real reason for the stop had nothing to do with her driving. Officer Mitchell, I've been driving for over 20 years, and I always signal when I turn. But more importantly, your approach to this traffic stop was unnecessarily aggressive and frightening, especially with my young daughter in the car. Mitchell realized that Judge Johnson was right, and he also understood that his behavior could have serious consequences for his career. Federal judges had significant influence over law enforcement, and treating one with disrespect could damage not just his own reputation, but also his department's relationship with the federal court system. Judge Johnson, I apologize for my approach, Mitchell said, though his apology seemed more motivated by fear of consequences than genuine remorse. I was just being cautious. Denise studied Mitchell's face and could see that he didn't really understand why his behavior had been problematic. Officer Mitchell, I want you to think about why you decided to follow my car and then stop me. Was it really because of my driving, or was it because you made assumptions about who belongs in this neighborhood? Mitchell was uncomfortable with the question because it forced him to examine his own motivations and biases. Judge Johnson, I stop cars for traffic violations, regardless of who's driving them. Do you? Denise asked. Because from my perspective, it seems like you followed me for several blocks, looking for a reason to stop me, and then you approached my car with a level of aggression that was completely inappropriate for a minor traffic violation. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mitchell's supervisor, Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez, who had been monitoring radio traffic and had become concerned when she heard that Mitchell had initiated a stop in Buckhead, without clearly stating the reason for the stop. "Mitchell, what's the situation here?" Sergeant Rodriguez asked as she approached the driver's side window. "Sergeant, this is Judge Denise Johnson from the federal court," Mitchell explained, his voice showing his discomfort with the situation. Sergeant Rodriguez immediately understood the seriousness of the situation. She had been with the Atlanta Police Department for 15 years and understood the importance of maintaining good relationships with the federal court system. She also recognized Judge Johnson by reputation, as the judge had presided over several high-profile cases involving Atlanta police officers. "Judge Johnson, I'm Sergeant Rodriguez," she said respectfully. "I apologize for any inconvenience. May I ask what happened here?" Denise appreciated the sergeant's professional demeanor, which was in stark contrast to Officer Mitchell's approach. "Sergeant Rodriguez, your officer stopped me for what he claims was a failure to signal, but his approach was unnecessarily aggressive and frightening to my daughter." Sergeant Rodriguez looked at Mitchell, who was clearly uncomfortable with the scrutiny. "Mitchell, did you have dashcam video of the traffic violation?" Mitchell realized that the dashcam video would likely show that Judge Johnson had signaled properly, undermining his justification for the stop. "I'll need to review the video, Sergeant." "I think that would be a good idea," Sergeant Rodriguez said. "Judge Johnson, again, I apologize for this incident. Is there anything else I can do to address your concerns?" Denise considered the sergeant's question carefully. She could file a complaint, which might result in disciplinary action for Officer Mitchell, but she also saw an opportunity to use this incident as a teaching moment that could lead to positive changes. "Sergeant Rodriguez, I'm more interested in making sure this doesn't happen to other people than I am in punishing Officer Mitchell," Denise said. "But I do think this incident raises some important questions about training and bias that your department should address." Sergeant Rodriguez appreciated Judge Johnson's measured response and recognized that she was being given an opportunity to address the problem constructively rather than defensively. "Judge Johnson, would you be willing to speak with our command staff about this incident? Your perspective could be valuable in helping us improve our training and procedures." Denise agreed to meet with the police command staff, and the traffic stop was concluded without any citation being issued. Officer Mitchell apologized again, though Denise could tell that he still didn't fully understand the implications of his action. Over the following weeks, Denise worked with the Atlanta Police Department to develop new training programs focused on implicit bias and professional conduct during traffic stops. She shared her experience as an example of how unconscious bias could affect police interactions with citizens, even when officers believed they were simply doing their jobs. Officer Mitchell was required to undergo additional training on bias and de-escalation technique. The experience forced him to examine his own assumptions and to understand how his unconscious biases had influenced his behavior during the traffic stop. The incident also led to broader changes in the department's policies and procedures. Supervisors were given additional tools for monitoring traffic stops and identifying patterns of behavior that might indicate bias. Officers received updated training on how to conduct professional and respectful interactions with all citizens, regardless of their race or the neighborhood where they encountered them. For Denise, the traffic stop served as a reminder that even someone in her position of power and authority was not immune to racial profiling. But she was pleased that her experience had led to positive changes that would benefit other citizens in the future. The story of Judge Johnson's traffic stop eventually became a case study used in police training programs across the country. It demonstrated how implicit bias could affect law enforcement interactions and how important it was for officers to examine their own assumptions and motivation. Maya, who had been frightened by Officer Mitchell's aggressive behavior, learned an important lesson about standing up for what is right and using difficult experiences to create positive change. She was proud of her mother for handling the situation with dignity and for working to make things better for other families. Years later, when people asked Denise about the incident, She would always emphasize that it wasn't about her personal feelings being hurt, but about the broader impact of biased policing on communities and individuals. When we allow racial profiling to continue unchallenged, she would say, we undermine the trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. That's not good for anyone. Officer Mitchell eventually became one of the department's most effective advocates for bias-free policing. He often shared his story with new recruits as an example of how unconscious bias could lead to inappropriate behavior and damage police-community relations. The federal judge who had been pulled over for driving while black had used her experience to create positive change and to help others understand the importance of treating all people with dignity and respect, regardless of their race or the assumptions others might make about them.